Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for today, April 30th, 2021. I want to begin with a story which is indicative of the kind of insanity we see in the intelligence community today in its posture towards Russia, in the effort to create an enemy image to convince the American people that we have to be prepared for a war. Whether they actually intend to go to war or not is hard to tell. Some of them obviously are. They're preparing for it. Others just want bigger defense budgets. But the stories they're concocting are becoming even more incredible. Yesterday, we reported on the argument that was presented that Russia was involved in a 2014 explosion at an ammunition depot in the Czech Republic, even though the president of Czechia denies it and says the Czech security services find no evidence of this. And yet the British and the US are rushing headlong toward possibly new sanctions against Russia. Well, here's a story that's hard to believe. The Pentagon accused the Russians of using directed energy weapons at Marines in Syria who came down with flu-like symptoms. The charge is that the helicopter, a Russian helicopter, flew overhead, and shortly afterwards, soldiers became sick. Now, this immediately became a topic for the U.S. Congress. The Politico reported that Pentagon officials were doing in-person briefings before Congress members, which led the usual hothead Senator Marco Rubio to come out and say this is another example of Russian aggression in the Middle East. And Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, told a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing that members of the intelligence community are focused on this issue. Now, what subsequently happened after doctors looked at the sick Marines, what they discovered is that they had suffered from food poisoning because they ate bad food. Now, in spite of this, Haines and others are still saying, well, we have to look into this. This just gives you an example of the kind of idiocy that puts us on a course toward war, and which ought to be taken by every person to think through what we can do to stop this, to change this kind of knee-jerk reaction based on fake reports, false flags, lies, and so on. So with that as a preface, let me get into the questions for today. First, we have a question on Biden's address. Was there anything positive in Biden's address to the Congress the other day? Well, perhaps the one positive is he got through the address. He was able to stand there and deliver an address which was coherent, but coherent in a way which showed the obvious problems with his administration. Let's start with the fact that it's premised on the whole idea that we're moving into an economic recovery, that we're going to keep interest rates, the Fed will keep interest rates at near zero for the next, until the end of 2022, and there'll be billions of dollars monthly of quantitative easing, that is the flow of money from the Fed to buy up bad debt, mortgage-backed securities, and treasuries. Now, all of this will do nothing for the real economy, the physical economy, which continues to decline. Instead, it's to create a green bubble, to use this unprecedented flow of money from the Federal Reserve to speculators to continue to trade worthless instruments to hopefully for them, to keep the debt from collapsing on their heads. So the idea that this is a transformative policy, that it's going back to FDR or Lyndon Johnson, is foolish. I mean, while today most conservatives deride the program, the anti-depression program of Franklin Roosevelt, they're simply wrong. Roosevelt's program was not make-work jobs, but projects that increased the overall productivity and economic advances of the United States, such as the Tennessee Valley Authority, such as finishing the Hoover Dam, the Northwest Bonneville Dam, and then related electricity generation. These were projects which not only created jobs for people who were unemployed, but created physical benefits for the economy to cheapen the overall cost of production and to bring whole sections of the United States into the modern era with electrification throughout the South and the Southwest. Biden has nothing of the sort. The green policy he's proposing is actually a step backward, as we've identified in our report, The Great Leap Backward, which I would urge you to purchase and read if you haven't done so yet. Now, the other aspect of Biden's talk which stood out to me was his comment about China, that we want competition from China, but not unfair competition. And he talked about, among other things, the Chinese government subsidizing industry as being unfair. Now, he just finished a section of his speech where he talked about major government subsidies for inefficient electricity production schemes of windmills and solar energy and biofuels and so on. Do they not see the disconnect there? Why are we saying it's wrong for China to subsidize industries which actually produce jobs and have lifted 800 million people out of poverty, when he's now proposing the same thing for useless industries in the United States? The fact is that government credit is part of a Hamiltonian credit system which actually allowed for the industrial development of our nation at its founding during the period of Lincoln and the second half of the 19th century, and then the post-World War II period in the United States. This is not un-American. This is not a move towards socialism. Federal credit, when put into production, actually stimulates the overall economy, whereas a green bubble stimulates nothing but worthless more paper, which will actually end up collapsing further the U.S. economy. So was there something positive? Not really. Now, second question, do you think Putin and the Russians actually believe they can negotiate with Biden's team? Well, look, what's the option? Is the option war? There are some people like Paul Craig Roberts who say, well, Putin should give the United States a bloody nose to get their attention. Well, I think his speech on April 21st got their attention, but they're still committed, at least a section of the people around Biden and definitely British intelligence, they're still committed to confrontation and provocation because they have no option. I think Putin's approach, the proper approach, is to maintain a calm response, which includes, if necessary, mobilization of forces as they did on the border of Ukraine, which includes moving troops into Syria as they did several years ago to combat terrorism and to show the United States that they're willing to be a partner in the fight against terrorism, if the U.S. is interested, but also to resist the strategy of the Great Reset and the Green New Deal that's coming from the Davos billionaires and the City of London, Wall Street, Silicon Valley bankers. The most effective thing the Russians can do is, on the one hand, hold out the opportunity to negotiate and for diplomatic activity, while at the same time rejecting cooperation in absolutely lunatic schemes. Now, Putin and Xi Jinping both participated in Biden's Earth Day summit, but what they essentially said, which was similar to what was said by a number of developing country leaders, well, you take care of your pollution problems. You're the ones producing most of the so-called carbon problem. We still want development. And I think what the Russians and the Chinese are well aware of, as are the people promoting the Davos plan, is that the Western financial system is dead. It's collapsing day by day, moving toward a point of an ultimate domino-style collapse. The idea of the green bubble is to prop up the system a little bit longer, but it won't work. The Russians, on the other hand, and the Chinese are committed to investing in physical economy and offering to participate with other countries in doing the same. This is going to shift the balance of power so that when the petrodollar system finally goes to its grave, we will have an alternative system based on the principles that Lyndon LaRouche identified as the American system of economics. Credit for physical production, infrastructure, scientific research and development. That's what the Russians and the Chinese are doing. Is that what we're doing? No. We're putting money into fake science and into non-realistic solutions, such as windmills and solar power. So I think ultimately, if we can avoid a war, there will be a reaction from the rest of the world toward a new paradigm. The question is, will we in the United States be able to bring the United States into that, or will we go down like past empires as the system collapses? So Putin and his advisors, do they believe they can negotiate with Biden? I'm not sure. They're going to try, and in the meantime, they're going to pursue their own sovereign interests and security interests. Now, the last question is, in dealing with things such as the war threat, which are highly emotional, we saw Tulsi Gabbard's comments about if we don't stop this, we're going to we'll end up in a nuclear war where we will watch our flesh burn off our bones. The question is, how do you deal with this crisis without fixating on the emotional aspect? Sorry, I still got a cold. Well, the first point is that you have to deal with the emotional aspect. You can't separate emotions from reality. To do that is called blocking. To try to avoid reality so that you don't get upset doesn't solve anything. It actually creates a situation which will be worse for you emotionally. One of the things we have to deal with is fear, and the fear is legitimate. Nuclear war is a horrendous option, and watching governments engage in insane policies is demoralizing and would tend to have people bury their heads in the sand. But actually, you have to educate your emotions so that as you see this, you respond with empathy, not just for yourself, but for the rest of the world, including those less fortunate than you, who are suffering from the effects of this global bankers' dictatorship that's being put into place. And so you deal with the fear by positive action, by recognizing that the solution comes from your ability to mobilize your creative powers to act for the good of mankind. Get out of the personal bubble. These kinds of emotions are crippling to the extent you're sitting there focused on what's going to happen to me. Oh, woe is me. Instead, use those emotions to generate two things: the empathy for others so that you can mobilize them, but also to mobilize your own creative powers so you can act in a positive way. So emotions are not the problem. It's succumbing to pessimism that allows those kinds of fears to take over and paralyze you. Right now, we need the population, especially younger people, to face the reality of the war danger, to face it bravely, and to go out and bring the solutions that are available to the broader population. And that's how you deal with these kinds of so-called emotional problems. So thanks for joining me today. Remember to go register for next Saturday's, May 8th, Schiller Institute Conference, and participate through joining the Schiller Institute and going to our website for information over the weekend when I won't be doing any reports. So until Monday, I'll see you later.